Welcome to episode 8 of the Always On podcast series, recorded at Carousel Executive Briefing Center here at our headquarters in Rhode Island. I'm your host, Jason Albuquerque, Carousel CIO and CISO. On this episode, we'll have an interview with our friends at Duo. We're going to discuss how organizations are handling secure access, deploying trusted access at scale, and we're going to review a great study, security outcome study from Duo. This is the Always On podcast series where we explore the intersection between technology, security, and the business with the industry's best. All right, let's go. So Wolfgang Goerlich is an advisory CISO for Duo Security. He's led IT and IT security in both healthcare and financial services verticals and advisory and assessment practices in several cybersecurity consulting firms. Wolfgang, welcome to the Always On podcast. It's great to have you.
Hey, so great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, no worries. So if you could, just give us an overview of Duo as a company and what your role consists of at Duo.
Sure, absolutely. So Duo is a trusted access company. When you break that down, what that means is strong assurance for who the person is, typically multi-factor, strong assurance around the devices that they're coming in on, right? Is that device theirs? Is it meet policy? Those sort of things. And a really robust policy engine that looks at not only those factors, the factors that we know, like don't let anyone with jailbroken phone in, but also considers behavior analytics. So is this person behaving like we'd expect? So that's that in a nutshell is what is behind trusted access, and that's really what Duo is known for.
Awesome. And just tell me a little bit about being an advisory CISO for Duo.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, my background is in healthcare and in financial services, and had an absolute blast building things out, growing teams, seeing what worked, what didn't, all the wonderful things I'm sure your audience loves doing. And then I had an opportunity with Duo to help bring some of that expertise in, right? I think we all have the experience of trying to implement some technology and talking to a vendor who just didn't get it, didn't understand what we're trying to do. Kept telling us you could just change everything, and if you just had their blinking box, all your problems would go away.
The struggle that we're having these days, right?
Yes, exactly. And so Duo is a very much a design first, human centric company, and so my role within Duo is to help make sure that the CISO's needs, the CIO needs are known, are met, and are reflected in the product set.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, that must be very fulfilling, right? I mean, at the end of the day, as as a security professional, and one thing that my team really has a mission and vision about is making sure that we're leaving our customers better than we found them, right? So for you to be able to have that level of influence at Duo, to be out there talking to the customers, talking to the clients, really digging deep into their needs, their wants, their hopes, and bringing that back to a product where you can have that outcome. That's awesome. That's a great role.
Yeah, I am very fortunate and enjoying it quite a bit.
Yeah. So from that perspective, I mean, over the course of the last 12 months, there's been a massive shift in the way we work, right? And it's had effects on IT folks, on security teams. And I'm going to look at the crystal ball. I think these effects are going to last for a very, very long time, right? We're not going to see the end of remote workforce or work from home. If anything, I think, organizations are really taking a look at, from a financial perspective, do they really need all of these brick and mortar buildings anymore? So, I look at it like this massive shift to remote workforce is going to continue, if not accelerate. So really, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that those customers that you interface with, right? What are some of the challenges that they're seeing today with that massive shift to remote workforce, accelerated digital transformation because of the pandemic and COVID? I mean, I've seen studies where they say some digital transformation products were accelerated by 5 years. They're happening 5 years ahead of time because of this, right? And then, of course, all of those security threats that are coming out of this, right? All of our friends, those hackers, they love to take advantage of disruption. So what are some of those challenges that you're seeing out there with customers these days?
Yeah, first, let's really just, pour one out for 2020. Yeah. I don't think we can really underestimate what just happened. We went through the largest migration in human history, the largest migration. And the first migration that wasn't predominantly from one city to one city, one state to one state, one continent to one continent, but really was from the physical to the virtual.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, and we can talk about some of the ramifications, but at the end of the year, I was looking at some statistics. 2/3 in America, 2/3 of the GDP, 2020 GDP, was produced by work from home employees.
That's incredible.
The average at the end of the year in America, 42% of the workforce remote.
Yeah.
And that is something we had just never seen. So much of our security has been predicated around, well, the person is in my building and they're on my device and they're accessing
they're in my
something.
network.
You know it, right? It's right over there. And they're running a wire this way to the data center.
Right.
And, that we've been chipping away at that foundation for years, but all of that went out of the window last year.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then you start seeing the challenges that happen with that, right? I mean, clients coming to us because, number one, resilience, that level of resilience wasn't built into their organization. But then now couple that with, authentication challenges, application access challenges, data access challenges, right? Loss of visibility. And that's where I feel Duo plays one hell of a role in coming to the table and saying, listen, we can help solve some of these challenges that you've seen over the course of the last 12 months. And hey, by the way, help you kind of consolidate all of those point solutions that you have out there, all those blinky lights we just talked about earlier, right? I mean, that's a huge challenge, having siloed tool sets out there, right? That don't really give you the context across the entire network. So, from my perspective, I feel Duo can really play a great role in solving some of those problems.
Yeah, certainly the remote work was, in the forefront of our minds, March, April, May, June, as we had to tackle this. How do you scale up VPNs? Certainly, but also how do you deliver services without VPNs?
Yeah,
because a lot of services, couldn't be delivered that way, or the VPN infrastructure couldn't scale quick enough. I've got a good friend, he's a CTO, and he was complaining to me. He's like, look, we built our entire remote infrastructure off the idea that we had 10 remote offices.
Right.
And by the end of the summer, we had 10,000 remote offices.
Exactly.
Everyone was out. So certainly the remote access side of it is important. The other side of it is that the visibility into the devices, that visibility into the activity. I was on a meeting and I'm looking, I'm like, what chair are you sitting in? It's small and it's pink. And and what is on the background? And where are you? And he goes, oh, I'm in my daughter's classroom, in-home classroom. Yeah. She's out playing. And so I just figured I would take the call in here, and he's connected through her school tablet.
Right.
So A, props for flexibility, but B, if I put my hat on for medical, well, can that tablet access, my medical records? Can get an Epic or Cerner? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So we as an industry so long now did not have policies around what devices could get to what apps and any real control around that. So not only thinking about enabling that remote access, but also thinking about putting in place some smart policies so we can govern it.
Yeah, and that leads right into where I wanted to go next, right, is really the technology behind Duo, because, a lot of folks think Duo is an MFA company, right? And I want to demystify that here, right? Duo is more than just MFA. It's device trust, it's adaptive access policies, it's remote access, it's SSO, right? There's so much involved with Duo. Help us in the audience really demystify the full gamut of the portfolio of what Duo can do for an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about it in terms of authenticating to your service, just think about logging into your service, right? Whatever it is. And we'll get to what that looks like at scale, but think about logging into service. First thing is, do we know who you are? Are you really who you say you are? And that's where we get into multi-factor, which you're right, was Duo's first product. It's where we have the greatest strength. So easy multi-factor, push on your phone or click on your UTF token. Now, what's also intriguing, what we're working on at the moment, and there's a white paper up on the site and some blogs I wrote if people want to know more about this, is, wait a minute, do you even need that password? We know passwords get stolen all the time. Why don't I just use that single strong factor? So there's a lot that can be talked about with multi-factor and a password and another factor, or just that strong factor. But all right, so now we've proven to the system that we are who we say they are. The next thing is a lot of these multi-factor attacks, and heck, a lot of password attacks are predicated on the idea that I, the criminal, are on another machine and I'm connecting with your token, right? So why not just simply say, hey, is this really Jason's computer? Is this really Wolf's tablet? And if it's not, well, maybe something wrong happened, block that access. So we start to think about device identity as being important as user identity. And then you start to say, well, what else could we tell, right? What else can we tell about these devices? And there can be some really intriguing use cases. So for example, what if we were to say, hey, no jailbroken phone could get into any sensitive systems? That's really powerful. People are still jailbreaking phones. I don't know why. You have options, people, but they are. Another one that I really liked was integrations with malware. I don't want any infected computer to access anything other than email in the help desk system so they can call for help. Boom, done. Yeah. So we can start to do some really great things around that device. What visibility do we have into policies? And then you mentioned Trust Monitor, which, or the behavior analytics side of it, which is really fascinating as well. Things like geography attacks, right? I log in Chicago, and now I'm logging in San Francisco, and now I'm logging in Russia. Well, one of those is probably not me. Maybe both of those are not me. Yeah. So we can start looking at those types of behaviors, and what this comes together with is the ability for us to raise the bar significantly on the attacker for the number of hurdles they have to jump before they get into access.
Yeah, and honestly, that's the key, right? Because once the attacker starts to struggle, and once they realize it's taking too long, a lot of attackers don't have a ton of patience, right? I mean, you do have attackers who want persistence and want to stick around, but there's an intent there. The majority of those attackers who really want to attack an organization or attack a person and get what they want, and they want to leave, right? So being able to create those levels of hurdles is huge, right? It helps thwart a whole segment of those malactors that are really after about the grab and snatch, right? They want some money real quick, and the behavior is a huge piece to that, right? Because how often are we seeing attacks where you have geolocations that don't match up? Then all of a sudden you have someone trying to log into an Office 365 instance, right? They're putting on forwarding rules within email boxes, right? They're doing those type of behaviors that aren't necessarily normal for that end user. And those are the things our security teams really want to see. They want to alert on. They want to have access policies to prevent if it's happening. And those are the things that we see every day. Especially through things like phishing attacks, right? I mean, that's the majority of the beginning of the attack that I'm seeing is a phishing attack, a user who's running 1,000 miles an hour, not particularly paying attention because they're so busy, and they fall victim to that phishing attack, and all of a sudden those behaviors of that user start to modify, start to change, and they're abnormal. And having a control set like this in place to be able to alert and prevent is huge.
Yeah, all of a sudden you see that the user agent string changes, and you're like, wait a minute, are you proxying this? And you can get all sorts of really interesting telemetry. When you're talking about the email I was involved, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but I was involved back in the day with a major breach that started off just like you say. They got into one email address.
Yep.
They, set up some forwarding rules. They used that to create a fake invoice site, and they routed millions of dollars from accounts payable from the legitimate suppliers to themselves.
Yep.
And boom, they're done. What do you do with that? You can't get it back.
Right. And the crazy part is they're doing that in the matter of days, in and out. Right. I mean, within 48 hours, 72 hours, they're pulling millions of dollars down, with all of these fake invoices and getting people to bite on them before they get caught. And then they're out. Right. They're in and out. And then they're off to the next victim. So, yeah, I mean, that user behavior, I've been saying for a while now, the key to security these days, because we're at a point now where it's really work from anywhere, and folks are trying to work with anything, any type of device, right? Work from anywhere with anything. Just let me get my job done, right? That's where the end user base is these days. And for me, it's about identity protection, data protection, and application protection. That's the triad of what we need to be focusing on these days, right? And the identity side is massively in need of that user behavior analytics to make sure you are who you say you are.
Yeah, the any model is really fascinating. It was 2017, according to stats that I've seen, that the tipping point was reached where more devices were accessing our corporate data that were user devices versus corporate devices.
Yep.
2017. Of course, BYOD came out in 2011 with Intel, but in 2017 we reached that capacity, and to this day we'll roll out Duo, and we'll ask people, hey, how many devices do you have? Oh, we got 10,000 employees, so we probably have 10,000 devices, maybe 20. And we'll roll it out, and they'll have 50,000 devices.
Yep. Open their eyes wide, right?
Exactly. So that fact hit in 2017. In 2020, we saw more people working remote in the corporate environments than not. Now in 2020, and this is one of those statistics that you can look at different ways, but based on our customer data set, in 2020, we're going to see more authentications to cloud apps and non-corporate services than on-premise services.
Sure.
And we've known that's been coming. People spin up things all the time. But to your point about any, that means the majority of activity is outside direct corporate control.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said in the beginning of this, it's not going to change anytime soon, if ever, right? Again, from financial perspective, I know for a fact, even with our customers, CFOs are really taking a look at brick and mortar these days and saying, do we need all this? We've been operating for over 12 months now successfully with this remote workforce, and we have these brick and mortar buildings with barely anybody in them. Do we need them? Right. So I just see it continuing. From my perspective, I think it makes good financial sense for them to be doing that analysis. So I don't think it's changing. Right.
I agree. And, we've been talking about the financial side. You mentioned, the security side, but I think the other aspect is, and definitely CIOs lead with this. I think savvy CISOs are leading with this as well. The other side of it is what are we providing? What are we enabling? What are we doing to improve usability?
Yeah.
What are we doing to improve the user experience? And so, back to that whole, all right, I'm simply logging in. Well, wait a minute. Two things. One, how did you find that app?
Right.
And so with Duo, we've come out with a cloud SSO portal, which is a really great way to collapse all your apps into one pane so people can find them, know where they need to go, and also reduce authentication friction. So you're not logging in 100 times. You're logging in once, and then, SAML OIDC in. And then the second part is, all right, when you're authenticating, how are you connecting at that network layer? And that's where I think things like remote access and the network gateway components come in, so that the user can have a really good experience if they're sitting at home or in a coffee shop or in the office, and it's a consistent experience. They're not having to jump through hoops and figure out where they are and what they need to do next based on location.
Right. No, and that's great. I mean, I wanted to talk about some of the business benefits that Duo brings to the table as well, right? And you talked about it, CIOs and savvy CISOs. And when you say that, automatically my mind goes, yeah, the executives who are aligned to the business, right? Those executives who are aligned to the business know that these are the type of things we need to be talking about. And it's and some of it is tangible, some of it's intangible, right? And I look at one of the benefits that you bring to the table, especially now being a Cisco company. So many CIOs and CISOs are trying to consolidate down that product set, all of those siloed tools that they had, right? Really consolidate it down into an ecosystem where they can get interoperability, visibility, and context across the stack, right? Are you starting to see that more and more with executives in leadership within technology and security?
Oh, absolutely. I see that on a day-to-day basis. How do we simplify? How do we integrate? How do we, reduce complexity?
Yeah.
We did a study, a CISO benchmark study in 2019. And one of the things that popped out of that data, which I thought was fascinating, was a direct correlation between the number of security tools and the downtime from an incident.
Wow.
And you would think, hey, if I've got more tools, I'd be up more, right? But the people who were down 17 hours or more were the people who had the most vendors.
Sure.
And I started thinking about it. And I remember this one time where we were having an outage and we weren't sure if it was operational or security. We were everyone in the war room and I'm pounding on the desk and I'm like, bring me answers. And I send out my team. I'm like, half hour back here, have answers. And everyone comes back, bleary-eyed, holding a cup of coffee. And the storage guy thinks it's a storage problem. And the networking guy is absolutely sure our backplane is saturated and we need to. And then the server guy is like, well, we're not getting enough, processor utilization. So maybe it's virtualization. And the security guy thinks that we've been hacked by some, nation state actor.
Sure.
And it really did. It took a lot longer to get everyone on the same page before we could even solve the problem.
Right. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you have the folks on your team going into all of these siloed platforms, pulling their own data set, and they have no way to correlate it together and build some context, right? And for me, I've always said I'd rather have an ecosystem of products that isn't necessarily built off of every single one being Gartner Magic Quadrant best of breed. I would rather have a set of really, really good applications and tools that talk together, share data with each other, and provide visibility and context across the entire network, right? And for me, I think that's a better benefit because, you're getting better intelligence at the end of that, right? Siloed information doesn't necessarily mean you're getting good intelligence.
Yeah, I agree. And if you think back to trusted access, part of that is determining how and why we trust. And I gave some examples that Duo can do directly, but there's also additional things. Like, for example, can we get feedback in terms of, are they beaconing out to any command and control? Can we get feedback from DNS? Can we get insight into how those devices are operating over a longer period of time? There are so many different aspects of security. And with each one of these things, using humans as the integration pipeline, right? I alert out, and I hope that some human sees my alert in the sea of 10,000 alerts that my SOC is doing within an hour and knows that means that I should click a button. Those days, they barely worked 10 years ago, and they definitely are not going to work now or going forward.
Yeah, and I see them going away, right? I think the beginning of those days going away is the fact that now we have executive leaders with the purse strings making the strategic decisions saying, wait a minute, time to consolidate down. This hasn't been working. Like you said, the last 10 years hasn't worked. Blinky lights aren't fixing the problem, right? So let's talk a little bit about more of the intangibles, right? I mean, you talked about user experience, but, I feel visibility is important, enforcement, the defense aspect and really the design of that ecosystem, how it snaps into other places within your network and in your ecosystem. So what are some other intangibles that your customers are really pulling out of We decided to go with Duo. We implemented the technologies, and here are the things that we're seeing from a business benefit coming back to us.
Yeah, the visibility is really a key one. The device side I mentioned a little bit more, but certainly if you're in a compliance state and you got to mandate that no data is going to any devices and encrypted and isn't protected, and yet you've got half your devices you don't even know about. That's a significant risk.
Right.
The visibility into the applications and where people are going also so critical, right? What device are they using? What apps are they going to? And that's also always concerning. Now, I mentioned this earlier, right? You can look at the data in different ways. 2021 is going to be a tipping point where, from a Duo perspective, more secure auths are going to cloud services. However, in 2018, there were an average of 1,400 cloud apps in an enterprise, and yet security teams were securing an average of 42 or 43 cloud apps.
What does that tell you?
Right. So, no visibility, no way to plug those in.
Right.
So you cannot defend what you can't see. So I think that is predominantly the main driver of business benefit. And then behind it, the fact that, when you've got disparate environments, you don't want to be telling someone, hey, by the way, make sure you're installing this MDM on your daughter's classroom tablet in case you want to join a web meeting.
Right.
The ability, we've got to be able to scale up and scale down. Certainly have a lockdown hard core for things that are accessing sensitive data, but be able to be relaxed and, sensitive to culture and privacy and the employee's needs. So that ability to maintain a spectrum of device control is also a thing that comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, if the user experience isn't a good one, our users are going to figure out a way to circumvent the security, right? They're gonna get shadow IT products, shadow applications, all that shadow cloud you were just talking about that IT departments and security departments don't know about. If you make the experience great for the users, they'll continue using, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you won't have that problem of shadow IT.
Absolutely agree. I on the personal side, I write a weekly blog looking at artists, looking at designers, because I truly believe that exactly what you said is what's missing from our field.
Yeah.
Security is so much about the user experience, their buy-in, their ability to follow what we want. And we focus a lot on the technology because that's what's really good. But so many of the problems are that last mile problem of that actual person, in the chair.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what we're starting to see, right? I equate it to the struggles that CIOs had, 15, 20 years ago, getting a seat at the table, right? They needed to get a seat at the table because they needed to understand the business. They needed to align technology to it. Back in the day, it was always, an hour. Saturday Night Live, I think, even had a little skit about the IT guy. It was, no, right? You're the dummy, right? You're talking to the end user, right? It was that stigma around not being customer service centric. I think traditional IT has gotten through that, right? They've become customer service centric. Security departments are facing that same challenge these days. Traditionally, they've been the department of no, right? Or putting controls in place that don't make the experience great. We need to overcome that because, again, as business leaders, as executives, as CISOs, we need a seat at the table. It's the only way to be able to take a look holistically at risk happening in the business and be able to solve for that, right? And without that seat at the table, we're not going to be able to do that. So customer service has to be part of the security teams these days. It has to be. User experience is part of that, right? And creating outcomes to get our business units to that same end game, right? Creating a strategy that we're all working together to get to an outcome that we want in a secure way. So you're absolutely right? It's part of the maturity of security these days, and this is where I think we're going to start seeing security teams really step up, learning the business, learning customer service, being that department to get us to the right outcome. So no, that's awesome. So let's kick in a little bit because I really wanted to cover this before we end the podcast. You guys have a great study. I took a look at it. It was a security outcome study, and it's awesome data. Can you just give us an overview of the study, why you guys did it, some of the things you looked at, and then we can get into maybe some of the findings and some of the outcomes that you saw come out of that study.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up because as a CISO, you've got 50 things you need to do. And you've got, another 10 outcomes you're aiming for. And it's really difficult to know which of these things I'm doing leads to which of those outcomes.
Yeah.
And so what do? You're like, well, I'll talk to my peers and figure out what they're doing. I'll read the latest threat reports and figure out what I should be concerned about. I'll listen to podcasts like this and get great ideas. And then you come back and those 50 things you thought you needed to do are now 75 things you need to do. Because you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that one. So at Cisco, we set out to figure out which behaviors are tied to which outcomes. And we went and surveyed 4,500 different security professionals in large and small companies around the world. Because that's another thing. I mentioned the GDP of the U.S. I don't know about you, but I was always frustrated because all the data is U.S. based. I'm like, well, what about my APAC offices? What about the, no, here's the U.S. survey. So we made sure to get good sampling across the globe and really tied down for the first time, I think, ever, unless someone wants to correct me, tied down doing what things result in what behaviors and what outcomes.
No, that's awesome.
So I'll give you a really good example that surprised me.
Yep.
I've got a blog on Cisco's site. It might be out by the time you guys post this, but it's in the works on security culture.
Yep.
So I am a big proponent of security culture. And one of the things that almost everyone says about security culture is you need to have the executives care about security.
Yep.
And it was fascinating to me. That is not correlated at all. We didn't see that in the data at all. And you're like, well, what's going on with that? We thought, I'm spending all this time telling the executives that they should care about security. What? But all that time is wasted, right? That would be time better spent making sure that the security team is aligned with what really matters to the business.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Just some of the tidbits I pulled out, right? I mean, SMS is going by the wayside, right? That's something that I've been wanting to have happen for quite a long time. Start looking at getting SMS multi-factor out the door. I think a lot of that was based on some of the SIM attacks that were happening, right? But I'm glad to see executives are actually saying, you want to know what? Not a great method of multi-factor. Let's just nix it altogether.
Better than nothing.
Better than nothing, agreed. But it's good to kind of see the maturity happening, right?
I don't know if you heard this or saw this in the news. They actually busted up a ring. And what this ring was doing was really fascinating. They had basically every model of phone with every version of firmware for the past 10 years running in a farm.
Yeah.
And then they had virtual SIM cards. So if I knew that you were running, an Android, a Samsung, whatever, or I was running an iPhone, I could spoof your SIM card and make it look like it was exact same make, model, and OS of the phone, and then go ahead and do a downstream attack.
Right.
Really fascinating how mature the tool set of the criminals is becoming.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think I heard a statistic that cybercrime right now is like the third largest economy in the world or something crazy like that.
So it was. I love stats because I'm watching it happen. In 2016, the amount of money in cybercrime exceeded the amount of money in drug trade. Wow. So think of like Breaking Bad, right? I mean, really, where all the money is in crime. And then in 2019, you could make more money on average off of business email compromise than you could off of robbing a bank.
Yeah.
So much money.
it's insane. I mean, having a statistic like that, and really looking at it, it's one of those scenarios where, number one, it gives me a chill because, being the CIO and CISO, I'm responsible for that for our customers and for our organization, right? And to know how lucrative it actually is and the motivations that a lot of these malactors have to do it. It's it's why we need to be having these kind of conversations with our customers. And like we said in the beginning of this podcast, leave our customers better than we found them, right? That should be the goal of companies like Cisco, Duo, Carousel, right? And all of these other organizations that are helping mature security programs. Let's always make sure we're leaving you better, right? In a better spot, a more secure spot, a more resilient spot, because it's changing so fast and there's so much attacks happening these days because follow the money. There's all that money behind it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Wolfgang, from a Duo perspective, can customers go out there and do proof of concept? Can they download demos? Can they really touch it, feel it, look at it? Is it something that they can work with an organization like Carousel to maybe take a little taste test?
Yeah, definitely. You can always download you can always start with a free trial. You can always run through some of the demos.
Sure.
And this is another thing I blogged about in terms of running a successful pilot. I always get concerned about that because when I led a team, I'd say, oh yeah, try the software out. And it would be a 30-day demo. And my guy would install it. And then there'd be a fire. And then we'd be doing this. And then we'd be doing that. And then we'd be going, hey, what did that software work? He's like, yeah, boss. Let me tell you after lunch. And he runs back to his room. I know what he's doing. Right. And suddenly that 30-day trial gets collapsed into 4 hours of scurrying around.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
Did it align to business objectives? Did it meet the stakeholders' needs? Is it really the technologies that can integrate? Those types of questions can only be answered by working with someone like Carousel, where you are planning this out. I think a pilot should be a well-defined, well-run project in and of itself to really make sure that you're making good decisions.
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct because, running a technology team, we run into that, right? It's, hey, let's check out this new tool. Let's do a proof of concept. Let's download a 90-day, trial demo version of the software. And you're right. It becomes that, last hour ditch effort, get it done because the whirlwind took over, right? And one of the things we always say here at Carousel is that, number one, there's a huge talent gap, not only in the security side, but the IT side, very, very large on the security side, right? And a lot of organizations are so caught up in the whirlwind, that they can't focus on the growth and transformation of their organization, which that's what this falls into. That's innovation, right? That's innovation time, where you're sitting down, you're demoing products, you're seeing if it fits your organization, you're seeing if it, if it's going to align with your business objectives. So that's where a company like you said, like Carousel, comes in and says, listen, we're going to help you get out of that whirlwind. Right? We're going to help you get out of that run so you can focus on the growth and transformation of your organization and be able to do true proof of concept to show business alignment, right? Be able to bring that product to your CFO, to your executive team to get the blessing because you'll be able to see the true value add that product is going to bring, those services are going to bring into your organization. And then you're not going to run into those historic issues of, we only adopted 20% of this product and we spent all this money on it, right? Because that's what happens at the end of that journey if you don't do it the right way.
Yes, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times when I was doing consulting, I would walk in and I'd be like, here's all your gaps. And they'd be like, how much do I need to spend? I'm like, no, you need to use what you've already bought and all these things.
Right.
Because to your point, if you're not getting out of that day-to-day grind and that operational mindset, and thinking strategically, it's easy to miss opportunities to really take advantage of tech, of partners, of your team and your ability, and it's easy to not fully utilize what you have.
Right. Well, Wolfgang, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great. I look forward to having you guys on again. This conversation that we just had I feel like we could have it for 3 hours straight. So I'd love to have you back on, pick some other topics. But for our listeners, if you want to learn more about Duo, you can go to carouselindustries.com/partner/Cisco. A lot of information there about Cisco, about Duo. You can find the actual study that we talked about there, and you can do a little bit of a deep dive there. And if you have any questions, feel free, reach out to Carousel Industries, and we'll help guide you to have the right conversations to make good strategic decisions, right, Wolfgang, around your security posture and leveraging applications like Duo. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is the Always On podcast. Thank you again.